What does death teach us about life?
What's up, you guys? Welcome to the Therapy Brothers podcast. I'm Brannon.
I'm Tyler. We're brothers.
We're therapists,
We're not afraid of your questions.
so bring it. Wow, that's a deep question. Before we get into that deep question, quick review says, wow, this podcast is eye-opening for sure. I'm learning so much. Acceptance is so much easier than expecting them to be a certain way. So that must be one of our major topics that we go to. So
Yeah, well, it seems to cycle around quite often.
yeah, it's all about acceptance.
There's
That's
a
how you
lot of
get
freedom
healthy.
in that. We could probably spend a whole other podcast on it if we want to.
Yeah, no question about that.
Who knows? Maybe this question will cycle us back around to it.
That's true, actually.
Yeah.
Because it all comes back to acceptance. It's yeah. Face reality, grieve, learn how to accept it, and that's where you find peace. It's that simple, right?
Yeah, when it's spoken, it's a lot harder to follow through with, to get your whole organism to follow suit.
Yeah. All right, that's a deep question, Tyler. You're going deep here. I guess I kind of had a part in deciding what the question was,
Of
but
course.
um,
Yeah, well, it kind of comes off of the heels of just some things that have gone on in our own lives over the last week or so, and I think it's I think these things have kind of made an impact on us and caused us to stand back and ask some questions ourselves and to consider our lives and what they really mean. And
yeah. I mean, just last week, I guess almost 2 weeks now, but got a text message from our mom and dad that my best friend when I was a child had died. Um, so he was just over 40 years old and died. He went into the hospital on a Monday night, died on a Tuesday morning. And I haven't really seen him in about 10, 15 years. We got disconnected, and but just him dying made me stop from the day-to-day rigors of life, the day-to-day stuff that I do. It seems like weeks just fly by, just doing my thing over and over and over again. All of a sudden he dies, and it makes you stop and really look at your mortality, and what are we doing here, and how much time do we have, and what is what is life all about, um, and to go to his funeral and to see his life lived and his family talk. It makes you think about your legacy and what you're creating in this life. And so that's been on our minds. You knew him well, you knew his family well as well. They were our neighbors growing up.
yeah,
So
it's funny, just as part of what happened when I heard the news is that it just like flooded my mind back to all of the things. I mean, when you talk about a boyhood best friend, Brannon, it was the kind of thing where you were raised as much by his parents as we were by our parents.
I,
And I remember, it seems like, and all of a sudden, it doesn't seem that long ago that we were in the backyard of the old lady's house next to us, stealing her peaches off of her tree. You know, and he was right there with us,
yeah,
and
yeah. He
um,
he he's one of those people that um just like you, like I don't remember not having you in my life. You just were there. You just automatically and so I don't remember meeting him because I just knew him. He was just in my life. And like you say, we were raised so close together. We were almost like family growing up. Um and to get disconnected in adulthood, to be honest with you, Tyler, one of the strongest feelings I had at his funeral was regret. Um,
I did too.
yeah, it's hard because he seemed to be disconnected from a lot of people. But it made me think about all the people that I love in my life that I neglect and I don't check in with and don't tell them how much I love them. And I realized that we can't constantly, we don't have enough energy to give love to everybody and take care of everybody. Um, but that feeling of regret really hit me hard. And it made me realize when I want to say I love you to somebody, I'm going to say I love you. When I get an inkling to call an old friend that I haven't talked to in a few years, I'm going to make that phone call. Um, and I'm not going to hold back. And I mean, I'm going to, the day that I die, people are going to know that I loved them. And that's what I learned from last week.
It's amazing how obviously it's a really painful, hard thing, and the grief is always such a tough thing. And it's one of those things that we're all guaranteed in our life is that we are going we are going to lose people that we love. And one of the, that's a terrible, hard thing that includes all of the grief process things, but it also offers the opportunity that you're talking about, Brannon, where you get to take a step back and we get to look at our lives and go, it's almost like a perfect opportunity for a wake-up call to any course corrections that could be going on in our lives. And I know that I felt some of the same things that you did with regret, that not just with him, but with a lot of other people in my life. I let people move out of my life, and if I ever see them, even after years of not seeing them, it's like we can pick right back up. And but while we were at the funeral, at the viewing, I bumped into another friend of ours, Stubby. Did you get to see Stubby at the funeral?
I went golfing with him on Tuesday.
Oh, awesome.
So,
Yeah. So he brought back a whole bunch of other memories. And he was another one of our best friends that, we sat and we had a great visit and we hugged each other and had this really cool moment, but said, I live in Logan, Utah. He lives in Salt Lake. He comes to Logan frequently. And for several years, we've never caught up or touched base. And now all of a sudden, here's this relationship again that might be worth fostering and might be worth taking care of. And so it sounds like he went golfing with you and he's going to come up and do some fly fishing with me, it sounds like. And, and yeah, our lives are busy, but this offers this opportunity for us to go into ourselves and say, what's it all about? Like for me, one of the things that has happened in all of this is not just the regret of the relationships that I haven't nurtured, but it's caused me to pause and step away and go, would I change how I'm living my life right now? Are there
yeah.
certain things that often seem so important that really at the end of the day they're not?
Yeah.
And should there be other priorities that could use my time and my energy that would be far more productive towards how I want to be known and the legacy that I want to leave on this world?
You could die today. Our grandpa, healthy as can be, fell off a cliff. That's how he died. He was 85, healthy as can be, just got remarried. Life was going well. Life was over. Boom. And he would always say, sometimes, your number is called or your number is up and life is over. And you could die today. I could die. I mean, lightning strikes, boom, car accident. Like, and I'm not saying this to be like, say live in fear, but the fact of the matter is all week long I've been saying to my kids and my family, and the time is now. Have you ever seen that Shia LaBeouf stupid thing where he's like, just do it, just do it. So my kids have been like doing that to me, like, just, yesterday you said tomorrow. So my kid, because I've been saying like, hey, the time is now, and they're like, just do it, just. But the fact of the matter is, why not now?
Yeah.
Why not love with your full heart right now? Why not give it all you got right now? Why not go for that risk, that business venture, that adventure in life? Why not now? Like, now is the time. Is it not?
Yeah, it's well, because it brings it all back to the moment, which is that the only place that we really have to have any sort of life, and I'm sorry, I'm a little bit emotional myself today, is is the moment that we're living in. I mean, Brandon, right now, the only thing that we really have is this
Now.
conversation. That's it. And if we're worried so much about, and I know I got some of the aftermath of what's happened for you because you called me and gave me the,
I
you
reamed you
know,
a little bit.
you gave me like I was probably
Yeah.
a 20-minute lecture about all the things that I should be doing to change my life, and I and
It's
I
true.
do
I did call him and give it to him. So.
and I appreciate that because a lot of what you spoke was the truth, and and having had this stuff happening, it's falling on a different set of ears. It's going, yeah, there are some things that I need to contemplate and I need to think about, and they're hard to hear because change is painful and change is hard and loss is painful and loss is hard, and yet it does offer us lots of opportunities. I mean, I'm thinking of the very first bit of loss that we ever really had in our life, and I'm sure you'll remember this because you had his collar up in your room all through
Yeah.
our boyhood. Is our little dog Brewster. When how old do you think you were?
You know, it's funny as I went to this funeral, this family was they're kind of like, man, when your dog died, you wailed for like a week. I can tell you, I was 10 years old. I was in 5th grade. It happened on November 13th at about 6 o'clock. He got hit by a car. Um, I know when he died because that was my first real experience with grief. My dog dying. So it's trauma. It hit me really hard.
And you have some, and that probably was one of the more traumatic things that happened in your boyhood, among other things. But um, inside of that, there's also some learning that we get afforded. There,
Absolutely.
you know, um, and I remember feeling as much pain because you were the one who kind of loved Brewster the most. I remember feeling pain for myself, but I also remember feeling a lot of pain for you because of how big of a loss it was in your life, and especially
Right.
with all of the things that were going on in your life at the time too, where Brewster was basically like an emotional support animal
Oh, he
for
was
you.
very, 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 very important. And,
Yeah.
it's, I think about, knock on wood, um, out of the 3 of us boys in the family, Brewster was my big grief, but our other brother lost his girlfriend. Um,
Tragic.
you lost your good friend and watched him die basically in your arms, in high school. So there was tragedy that happened in our family, and grief, and it really, when those things happen, um, you try to make sense of them, but it doesn't seem like they should have happened. But those things happening, each time they happen, whether it was Brewster dying or your friend falling off the roof, and I felt the same way. My pain was more for you than it really was for him. Um, or Rex's girlfriend dying. As crazy as those times were, that it brought this sense of awareness and this sense of peace, and this sense that hey, there's something bigger going on here than just living, breathing, and eating, and doing our thing. And another thing that it did each time was just bond us closer together, and you feel more love when you're in pain like that than you ever feel. um and so, as weird as this might sound, I'm very grateful for those experiences, because that's part of living, is to feel pain on those levels. And I'm sure I got a lot more pain to come, and I'm not looking forward to it, but I'm willing to face it, and I'm willing to experience God's love in it, um, as it comes. So, um,
And I think, Brandon, that's beautifully said, and that's maybe one of the biggest takeaways that that I was thinking about with death and what it really offers us in life is truly a deeper sense of connection to other people, to God, to our own hearts and our own minds. I remember having an experience that, I attended, your mother-in-law's funeral when she
Hmm.
passed away of cancer, and I didn't really even know your mother-in-law that well. I was there 100% really to show support to you and to Jenny, and yet I was sitting in the funeral, and your mother-in-law used to sing for the Mormon Tabernacle Choir, and so she was fortunate enough to have a
Amazing
choir and
music.
an amazing choir at her
Her
funeral,
funeral
and
was the most amazing
it was the most amazing
thing.
experience.
Yeah.
And I remember sitting kind of towards the back there and having this, just for a few minutes, this almost ultra transcendent moment where I felt this deep, deep sense of interconnection and just pure whole love for everyone else in the room, for for God, and even this sense of like deep sense of self. It was like it was like a
Wa-
transcendent
was
spiritual experience
that
for me.
during How Great Thou Art?
Yeah, during while they
Oh
were
my
singing
gosh,
"How Great Thou Art."
I just got chills. Yeah, I felt it too during that song, and like it was this powerful energy of connectedness, love, peace, God's love, and the music was just incredible. The organ player was music brought the energy in and brought God in, and all the singing and connect. It was so incredible. One of the best experiences of my life, and sounds like yours too.
Yeah, it was a pretty powerful thing, and it's amazing to me that, because of our capacity as human beings for for empathy and our drive, our inner drive for connection, as you were saying, these terrible things that happen only have the potential to drive us closer together. It says, we quote this all the time, but a friend is a friend for a mile or two, but a brother is born for adversity. And there's something in that adversity when you go through it, where the people that go through it with you, it's almost like some type of a cement takes place in the bonds of that
Yeah,
relationship.
yeah.
I remember with like my buddy Sean when he died, there were four other boys with me when the accident happened, and um, we've all gone our separate ways, but there's still this like tie and this bond with having gone through something like
That
that
together.
with them.
Yep,
Um,
yep. It's interesting because I was a hospice social worker. That's where I first became a therapist. Is I did death and dying. I dealt with grief. I also dealt with a lot of case management around death. So what that means is I dealt with helping families figure out the logistics of things, and it was really fascinating because and I was over in Hawaii, so the culture in Hawaii is different than a lot of places. It's actually amazing. But it's fascinating to watch the different families. Sometimes death would bring them together, and the logistic part of things would be easy. They'd celebrate life together, they'd cry together, they'd feel love together, and they'd wait for their loved one to die. And it was beautiful. And I was a therapist for families of loved ones who were in their 30s, who were dying of cancer, or loved ones who were really elderly, or whatever. And it didn't really matter the age. The energy was good, or it was horrible, and it was chaos. And what usually was happening is they were resistant to death. They didn't want it. They fought it. The family fought it. It caused contention amongst the family. It caused selfishness, and they fought. And it really it brought out one way or the other with these families. I had to a couple times get very um, blunt and direct with people of, you need to stop right now and focus on the fact that your loved one is dying. The drama with each other needs to stop. All of this needs to die down and just be right
just
now
let it be.
with them. Um, but I would say, Tyler, coming back to what you said, has to do with acceptance. Um, if you reject the reality that there's death, then you're going to suffer. If you accept the reality that there's death, then you're going to feel peace. Pema Chodron, she says, if our entire life is spent trying to not die, then we're not going to live. So if
you can't live,
you can't live. So if you accept the reality that we're going to die, then you can live. And you can be grateful for each day and the life we have, but also look forward to and be grateful for the time that comes when we die. Right?
Right. Because it's just inevitable, and it will be what it is.
Yeah.
Right. As you're talking, I'm like, for some reason, I'm having Tim McGraw's "Live Like What You Were Dying" like roll through my mind.
and his new song, "Call Mama." So make sure you call her, and when you're sitting down by the river eating a Slim Jim and a Coke. You heard his new song?
Yeah, I've heard it. It's
yeah. So be contemplative and live like you were dying.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny because you could almost break it down to those couple of songs and have a pretty sweet life.
He nails it.
He nailed it.
And he's married to Faith. He's married to Faith Hill, so he really nails it.
Yeah.
Like life is good for Tim.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think here we are just kind of contemplating about life, but I would say if anyone's listening and you kind of heard our personal stories and what we're going through, make that phone call today to somebody that just pops into your mind. They're popping into your mind for a reason. And or love on your kids just a little extra today. Give them a little more effort and a little more time and energy than your Instagram account. And I'm not saying that to shit on you. I'm just saying, like, live, connect, be with your family. Because to me, that's what it's all about. It's all about love. It's all about connection. It's all about feeling God's love through you for others. And so that's what death reminds me to do. And that feeling that we felt at Peggy's funeral, that was that feeling of connectedness to each other. So
yeah, same, man. And I think, just Brannon, what you're saying, if our listeners, if you were to just ask yourself the question, like, if I knew I wouldn't wake up tomorrow,
if tomorrow never comes.
Yeah. Hey, Garth, there you go. Some Garth Brooks,
yeah.
which is your man,
Oh,
but,
is he ever?
But no, really, I mean, that you really ponder that question, it doesn't take very long for an answer to settle in. And it might be that name of that person I'd want to call, or that person that I want to give a hug to, or this thing that I would need to want to go do, and I would bet that most people, when they ask that question to themselves, their natural response that would come in would often, in fact, most likely be relational.
Yep.
It would be something to do with someone else, the people that you love, whether that's laying down a resentment that's held on for a really, really long time, or whether that's calling somebody that you haven't talked to in a long time and telling them that you love them, or
calling your brother and reaming him about his workaholism,
or like saying, man, I'm living, but my brother's not, so I better hurry and help him try to live. Right. But it might be that, though, because it'll be different for every one of us. But I would bet that in almost all cases it would be relational, because at the end of the day, that's really what this life is about. When we look far from now, and you look at transcendent people across history, and when you think about your own life, all of us want to leave some type of a legacy. All of us want to have some meaning or purpose to our life. And the only things that ever actually really potentially last is ultimately how you make a difference in somebody else's life. And, whether that's inventing the light bulb, or doing therapy for a single person, or whatever, that's the only thing that has the potential to have a legacy that lives on beyond our mortal existence.
right?
And if we don't take some time to really contemplate that, and contemplate the gifts that we've been given, the unique recipe that we have to make a difference in the lives of other people, then we're selling ourselves short.
Right. I agree.
So.
All right, Skillet, this has been good. Oh, I call him Skillet sometimes. That's like my nickname for him. It's been good. I actually love the topic of death. I think death is an awesome part of our living experience. So
It's really interesting, Brannon, because when most people hear, "Oh man, there's this funeral to go to," or somebody that's dying, most people are like, "Oh, I hate going to funerals." I don't. But we were raised in a home where it's like, you remember, Dad? He would pull out the newspaper and he would like highlight the people that had died, and then he like couldn't wait to go to their funerals. Like, if there's something that our old man loves more than anything, it's a good funeral.
oh,
And
absolutely.
and so we've kind of been taught this, and we've also had some experience with death that has kind of forced this upon us. But
You know,
there,
can I share a story of mom and dad? And I don't think they'll mind me sharing, but we went to the viewing, and um, the the dad of this kid came up to our dad and said, "Hey, I was expecting you to call me all week. Like, where have you been?" And our dad said, "Well, I didn't have your number." And he said, "You know plenty of people with my number." And it was interesting because and mom, she had actually reached out to the mom, but she talked about how hesitant she was of like, this is awkward. Their son just died. I don't know
they
what to
hadn't
do.
talked in years.
And but she did it. And then after that conversation, she talked about that the dad had with our dad. She talked about how grateful she was that she followed through on her intuition to do it. And it just comes back to what you were saying about how dad, he reads the obituaries and goes to funerals. I think a lot of times in times of death, we feel awkward, we feel uncomfortable, and we want to give space and shy away from giving love. And I would say to challenge that a little bit.
I
Um,
uh, I totally agree with you, Brandon. I learned this lesson the hard way, and this is one of my life regrets. But remember when Uncle Dave was dying with
mhm,
cancer, and I was looking at my schedule, and we just got the news that he was dying, and I thought, okay, well, he's got a couple days to live. What do I do? And how do I get my time off? And so I chose to like take some time off before he died to go down, and I visited him and had this visit, and then he died like 2 days later.
yeah,
And then I justified, well, I've already said goodbye. I've already talked to him, and I didn't show up to the funeral. I went to work instead of going to my uncle's funeral. And one of the life lessons that I think I've learned is that experiences is that there's very few things or gifts that you could really offer somebody than to show up at the funeral so that the family has that ability to grieve and connect. And if you want a chance to join with somebody and to connect with somebody, you show up at their funeral. And so uh, uh, about a year after Uncle Dave died, another one of my good friends where we used to live in Idaho, his father died. And I didn't really know his father that much, but I had just heard through the grapevine that his father died. And so I did take the initiative to go and find out when the funeral was. And I didn't call him immediately, but I showed up at the funeral. And I haven't seen this friend in a couple of years. And when I walked through the door to the viewing, his knees almost buckled and he started to cry. And he just came walking over to me. He said, you excuse me, you do not know what it means that you showed up here today.
yep,
And it was nothing. It was a 3-hour drive in my car. And now there's a feeling of brotherhood that got forged even deeper because you showed up.
yep,
And there's
yep.
something about showing up in that time of loss for somebody that just does something that really, really makes a difference, and it matters.
When grandma died, um, Chris and Jared, they sat in the back corner of the chapel and sat through the entire funeral. And there was some pretty um, difficult talks to sit through um, at that funeral. And it was a long funeral. And they sat there. And this was our, 95-year-old grandma who had Alzheimer's for 15 years. They didn't know her. They didn't know her at
Yeah, they're
all.
just a couple of your buddies. They just cared
But
about you.
but isn't it interesting that I remember that they sat through her entire funeral? That really meant something to me, and I'm sure to Rex. And so yeah, I've been on both sides of that coin. And I think don't when your friends are in pain, don't run.
Show up.
Run toward them. So,
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for listening, guys. I know
Yeah.
we hope we haven't depressed anybody today.
This isn't our typical episode, but hopefully there's something beneficial to you here. I think there's definitely some principles of truth in what we've been talking about. And I'd challenge you guys to take the challenge Brannon just offered, that you consider, if you didn't wake up tomorrow, what would be the one item on your list that you want to make sure you took care of, and then follow through with it. Don't let the sun go down before you follow through with whatever that impression is.
Absolutely. No poem today, Tyler?
We'll leave the poetry out of it. Today would be a really good one for some poetry, but we'll let it slide today.
Well, we could always quote Garth. If tomorrow never comes, will she know how much you loved her? Did you try in every way to show her every day that she's the only one? That's it. So.
Well done, Brannon.
Thanks, Garth.
Thanks,
we'll see you guys.
We'll see you.